Something unprecedented is happening in the United States. The richest nation on earth is becoming unlivable for millions of its own citizens. In 2025, the so-called American dream has hit a breaking point as rising costs, housing shortages, and economic instability collide in a perfect storm that's now redefining daily life. What was once the global symbol of prosperity is facing a silent crisis, one that experts warn could reshape America's political, social, and economic future. The numbers alone tell a shocking story. More than 60% of Americans now live paycheck to paycheck, even as the U.S. maintains its position as the world's wealthiest economy. The irony is impossible to ignore. Record GDP, but record personal debt. From California to New York, everyday costs have soared. In California, the cost of living index sits at an eye-watering 200.1, with Massachusetts and New York close behind. Housing, healthcare, and groceries have become so expensive that even middle-class families are struggling to stay afloat. Behind this economic pressure lies a deeper story of imbalance, a widening gap between wealth and wages that's quietly dismantling the country's foundation. The housing crisis is now one of the most visible signs of this breakdown. Across the U.S., there simply aren't enough homes for the people who need them. The result? Skyrocketing rents, shrinking options, and an entire generation priced out of homeownership. For many Americans, the idea of buying a house, once the ultimate symbol of success, now feels like a fantasy. But the crisis doesn't end at the front door. The job market, once the heartbeat of American opportunity, has begun to cool. Unemployment fears are rising again, and while the economy hasn't entered a full-blown recession, growth has slowed dramatically. A series of new immigration restrictions and tariff policies have disrupted the labor force and discouraged foreign investment. Businesses are hesitant. Hiring has slowed. And while official statements from Washington promise stability, the numbers tell a different story. An economy that's fragile, uncertain, and unevenly distributed. This slowdown has triggered a ripple effect across society. Younger workers, especially Gen Z and millennials, are carrying record levels of debt despite higher nominal wages. Many have seen their net worth rise on paper, yet their daily reality is defined by rent hikes, medical bills, and student loans. For them, the American economy feels like a rigged game, one where working harder doesn't necessarily mean living better. And beneath these financial struggles lies a growing social tension. The U.S. remains deeply divided along racial, economic, and political lines. Structural racism, immigration disputes, and a criminal justice system seen as inequitable continue to fuel frustration. Income inequality has become the great unspoken crisis, a divide so large that the top 10% of Americans now control nearly 70% of all wealth. Government policy has done little to restore faith. With federal debt now surpassing levels not seen since World War II, concerns about fiscal responsibility are escalating. Political leaders across the spectrum have clashed over how to manage ballooning deficits, with little consensus in sight. Climate policy, anti-corruption measures, and healthcare reform remain trapped in partisan gridlock. The result is a government that feels distant, reactive, and increasingly unable to deliver solutions. This combination, economic strain, political paralysis, and social division, is reshaping what it means to live in America. For many families, it's not about achieving prosperity anymore, it's about survival. Even states once considered affordable, like Missouri and Oklahoma, are reporting rising costs across utilities and groceries. There's nowhere left to hide from inflation's impact. And yet, this is not a story about collapse. It's a story about transformation. The question now is whether the U.S. can adapt fast enough to prevent this crisis from becoming permanent. Systemic reform isn't optional anymore, it's urgent. Without meaningful action to address housing shortages, income inequality, and fiscal mismanagement, the risk of a deeper economic fracture grows with each passing year. All eyes are now on how Washington responds in the coming months. Will policymakers finally prioritize affordability, job creation, and debt reduction, or will political gridlock push the nation closer to a long-term decline? The next legislative sessions could determine whether the United States reclaims its promise or cements a new era of financial insecurity. This isn't just an American issue, it's a global one. As the U.S. economy slows, international markets feel the pressure. Global trade, energy prices, and even migration patterns are being reshaped by America's internal instability. The choices made in Washington today could redefine global confidence in the U.S. for decades to come. What happens next will test the strength of the American system, its economy, its leadership, and its people. The next 48 hours may not decide the outcome, but the next 12 months certainly will. This is the moment when the richest country in the world must decide whether it still works for the people who live in it. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for more in-depth analysis as this story continues to unfold. Because in times like these, cutting through the noise matters more than ever.